And as I walk in the door, I was greeted by the host, and the hostess came to me and asked me, how many are in your party? And I told them we have 15. So the host said, okay, let me take a second, walk over and get set up. So I originally had told him 15, and I realized his question, but I responded, what does that matter? And so the host said, well, we have a regular customer here who doesn't want to sit around black people. Okay. So at this point, excuse me, this is a very tough time for us. So I just told him we're going to go ahead and sit down. And at this point, there's a lot of things racing through my mind. I'm surprised. I feel disrespected. I actually, and I don't even know what to say because nothing like this has ever happened. So we go to take a seat. We kind of file in with our large party and go to sit down. We're sitting right behind this customer, this racist customer, this racist regular customer who knowingly is racist by the staff, and we sit right behind him very uncomfortably, and we sit down and take a seat at the table. And at this point, this is where I shared with Marcus and the rest of the adults kind of what was going on, and they were immediately astonished as well and surprised and almost thought I was kind of making it up, but we could realize there's some tension in the room because that racist customer continued to look back at us and give us some dirty looks. We did not speak with them, but we could tell that he did not want us there. Us being blacks, biracial, just a very unique and diverse and happy group. And obviously this bigot of a customer did not want us sitting there in a public establishment where we were wanted. So then a couple minutes went by while we were sitting there waiting, and one of the managers had came over to us. This gentleman came over to us, and he says, speaks to Marcus and I, and comes and kneels down at the side of the table and says, excuse me, but we're going to have to move you guys. This table is reserved.
Well, those two managers don't have a job, Jason.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. I mean, it's almost mystifying that somebody who works at an establishment and is the manager would be so stupid. I mean, this is almost like, have they not heard of Rosa Parks? Or like it's the stupidest thing that I've ever seen, someone who is manager at an establishment do. You would think that they would know better. Like, I can't even imagine it.
Well, they don't.
I can.
They don't. I don't think they would know better. I mean, this is something clearly that has been condoned. The fact that they know they were able to identify that their regular customer was a racist. So that's problem number one.
I dig that, but my thing is, we saw the Starbucks thing pop off, which was far less than this.
But no one thinks it's going to be them,
aren't going to be that stupid.
No one thinks that they're
blatantly say,
I'm with Roland on
you
that.
can't be here because you're black, so we're going to move you for the convenience of this
because
customer.
you don't expect anyone.
Crazy.
You don't expect any noise to come out of it. I can assure you that this family, they're not the first family or person or person of color that this has happened to at that restaurant. The fact that they knew that they had a racist, not someone that they suspected to be a racist. Clearly, this is someone that they knew was a racist. And the only way that you know that that person is a racist is because you've interacted enough with them to say definitively, okay, well, and to have the cojones to tell someone, first of all, ask them about your race. I don't even know.
Yeah, that's weird.
As if they look Swedish. I don't know.
You had a party of 18.
Yeah.
You're gonna get more money from them.
Yeah.
But
they've done it before,
but that's not
though.
The point.
They've done it before, and I'm glad that they've been.
The point is,
you
got two managers who got no problem making racists feel comfortable. Kelly.
No,
It doesn't make economic sense.
But racism doesn't make sense.
Okay, racism never made economic sense.
Right.
I disagree with that. I think racism has made economic sense.
No.
For people.
No, what I mean is the amount of time and energy put into into that, and also the denial of income as well. So the bottom line is, look, the amount of money that was actually spent to keep schools closed. Hell, white kids weren't even going to school. Bottom line is, folks have been stuck on stupid, but this is a perfect example of when you're comfortable with racism, you want black people, Kelly, to accede to their demands.
And to Jason's point about, racism being economically beneficial, it's only up until a certain point anyway, because at the end of the day, like you said, the structure itself is just not sustainable on its ideology alone. You have to put in extra effort, extra time, extra anything to go above and beyond to be that stupid, which is exactly what you see here. It's like they had to lie and say that there was another party that was larger than theirs by one person. By one person coming. So that's why they had to move. When everything else failed, when common sense failed, they had to be even dumber to cover up the dumb thing that they were doing. So it's just not sustainable.
The damage had been done. And now, did I hear him correctly when he said that they asked when they went into the restaurant what their race was?
I think they were like about to sit down or something.
Yeah.
I think
They asked the
roof would have been off the restaurant when they asked me that question. They probably would have had to call the police there at that moment where they asked me what my race was.
Let me say it again. And I hope black people went and applied for those two. There are 2 vacant manager jobs at Buffalo Wild Wings. And so again, y'all, to all of you racists,
I hope they get damages.
To all of you racists, I greatly appreciate you showing yourselves. Please. Because I think you're going to personally ensure that black unemployment is eradicated. So I want the bigots to keep showing themselves.
Yeah.
Because we're going to make sure they keep getting fired.
Somebody needs to.
And again, if y'all looking for a job, please, by all means, show up at the Buffalo Wild Wings to do so. It would be absolutely great if we could see that happen. And so, to all the racists and the bigots. All right, folks, the African Union has come under fire for terminating the appointment of Arakana Chihombori Quayle. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, got it. It's ambassador to the United States. Now, a spokesperson for the AU chairman's office says that she has come to the end of her political appointment after spending 3 years in the position, but her supporters believe that she is being punished for her views. Joining us now for an exclusive interview about her dismissal is the former AU ambassador to the United States. So, you were appointed 3 years ago. Who appointed you?
It was the then chairman of the African Union, Her Excellency Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma.
And who made the decision to end your tenure?
It was the current chairperson, His Excellency Mustafa Ki Mahamat.
All right, and so did you have any knowledge that they were unhappy with your performance? Was it something that you said, something that you did? Did it catch you completely by surprise?
It wasn't really a surprise. I think based on some information I had been privileged to, which I really can't disclose at this time, about 5 months earlier. So it wasn't really a surprise as such.
And so this has been lots of discussion back and forth, obviously, from your supporters. And they say that your breakdown of the history of how modern-day Africa was created, colonization, and the control or impact France has had on many African countries is why you were let go.
My supporters feel that way, and there's some suggestion and some evidence. Like I said, I'm not privy to that information, but I would. There is some evidence to that effect. Yes.
So you believe that France is still trying to silence you? Do you believe that?
Let me put it this way. Maybe I lasted longer than I probably would have based on my views on France, and it's not even my view, it's basically stating the facts in terms of what France is doing to Africa.
What they're currently doing?
What they're currently doing and have been doing for decades, since the quote-unquote independence of the former French colonies, yes.
So what is happening? Because look, the reality is a lot of Americans are not necessarily hearing about what's happening in African nations. 7 of the top 10 fastest growing economies come from Africa, but you also have a significant impact of the Chinese in many African countries as well. And so do you believe that the government of France still has a lot of control over a number of African nations of their former colonies?
They have significant control over all of their former colonies, specifically 14 of them. Just to give you the highlights of what they did when they were giving the independence, so to speak, to their former colonies, they forced them to sign a document which they are calling the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. You have to understand, on one hand, they are saying we're giving you independence, which turned out to be mostly political independence, but that you also have to sign this document, which is titled the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. So you're going to be independent, but you have to agree to continue to be colonized. So 2 countries said absolutely not. We are not going to sign those that document.
Those 2 countries?
Mali and Guinea.
Okay.
And what the French did, they went into those 2 countries, took everything that they thought they had brought to those 2 economies, poured concrete into the sewage pipes, and completely devastating the 2 economies. This was done as a way of letting the other countries know that if you do not sign this document, this is the fate that awaits you.
How has that negatively impacted those African countries?
It has impacted them terribly, terribly, terribly. If you look at it, you give up your, the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization said those countries were expected to deposit 85% of their bank reserves back then with the French Central Bank under the control of the French Minister of Finance. And should those countries wish to request some of those monies, because remember they were only left with 15% of their reserves, then they would have to submit a financial statement for the country, and if approved, they could only access up to 20% of whatever they had deposited the year before as a loan at commercial interest rates. The only difference now is the 85% deposits have now been lowered down to maybe between 50 and 60%. But the countries are still forced and required to deposit their bank reserves with the French Central Bank. So picture this situation. You are depositing all your monies with France. Should you need some of your money, you get it as a loan at commercial interest rates. So immediately, you have a credit with France, but you begin to owe France. This has been going on and continues to this day. So combined, the 14 countries are giving to France cash, cold hard cash, over $500 billion every year. And France takes that money and invests it in its own stock market under the French name, and the countries may or may not know the returns. Currently, for every 14 billion that France takes out of Africa, by the time they finish investing it in the French stock market, they are realizing upwards of 300 billion. So you do the math to see how much money France is taking out of Africa every year. And yet France has the audacity to then look at African countries and call them poor countries. Why would poor African countries give $500 billion to France year in and year out? What really gets me the most is, how does the world sit back and watch this carnage take place in Africa? Where is the United Nations? This is the body that's supposed to be looking out for any violations of human rights. It is my humble opinion that singularly, what France is doing to Africa is the biggest violation of human rights. Women and children are dying of starvation, youth unemployment, when the same poor countries are giving $500 billion to France. It simply does not make any sense. And I don't know how the world can sit back and watch all this unfold and nobody is saying anything. It's unacceptable. It is wrong, and we're simply asking France to do what is right, what is just, and what is fair with the Africans.
I attended the event that took place at the embassy here, and we actually ran your speech where you gave the history of what took place and how modern-day Africa was carved up. For the folks who don't know, explain the Berlin Conference.
The Berlin Conference was our colonizers' way of seeing to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. They came together in Berlin at the invitation of the then Chancellor of Germany, Bismarck, to divide up Africa.
1891, what was
November 1884 to February of 1885.
Got it.
They met and chopped up Africa into the tiny little economies that we see today. Economies that clearly cannot survive on their own. Economies that are easy to destabilize should they begin to look like they're having a leg up. Economies that will make it very difficult for these countries to trade with each other. You see, economic development is increased productivity from one production cycle to the other. If you interfere with the ability of countries to trade, you immediately mess with economic development. So that partitioning of Africa back in 1884 and those partitionings remain in place today is responsible for a lot of what has happened in Africa, our inability to grow our economies, our inability to travel from one country to the other. You look at tourism. If you need to go to Africa and visit 3 different countries, you got to send your passport to DC 3 different times. And each time your passport comes back, you got to send it again to another country, 2, 3, 4 weeks before you get your passport back. And then you got to send it back to Washington. At times, those embassies are on the same street. You could have walked from one embassy to the other, but you can't do it. And by the time you get your passport back with the 3rd visa, the visa for the first country is expired. Who needs to go through all that? So you say, forget it, I'm not going to Africa, I'm going to Europe. At every level, what we see happening today in Africa that affects economic development is directly related to what was done in 1884. You try to go from one part of Africa to the other. It's easier to fly into Europe and then come back down. Why? A lot of the airspaces were closed. All of it, thanks to the Berlin Conference. So people don't realize that that decision has everlasting implications on what goes on in Africa. And at the end of the day, it crystallizes down to our failure to grow our economies because it is very expensive to do business from one country to the other.
So I'm going to Ghana in December. So if I'm in Ghana and I want to fly to Nigeria or go to Kenya, what's that process?
Nigeria is almost impossible because it's going to take you a while to get a visa to go to Nigeria. I'm not so sure about Kenya, but again, you need a visa to get to those countries.
But if I was in France and I wanted to go to Germany, or I wanted to go to another European country.
As a U.S. citizen with a U.S. passport, you're fine. You can just go. If you're from another country, you can actually just apply for what they call a Schengen visa. A Schengen visa allows you to travel throughout Europe. One visa will allow you to travel throughout Europe.
Okay, but what I'm trying to understand is, so those rules that were set up that prohibits me from being in Ghana and deciding to say, hey, I want to go, the next 3 days I want to go to Nigeria. Those rules were set up when?
Those rules were set up back in 1884. However, we as African leaders now are beginning to realize that we need to do something about this. So a lot of them now, within Africa, we have what we're calling visa on arrival, where you show up at the borders and you can apply for a visa and you get it. But not all countries are doing visa on arrival. So you have to check the website of every country to see what, for your particular passport, what are the visa requirements.
This is, go to my, actually it went away. I'm trying to pull this map up. And once we have it up, I want to pull it up. Because I want to show, so give our folks a sense of Africa before the Berlin Conference and afterwards, because when I look at this map, what I see is I don't see as many countries as we see today. So we see Henry, go to my iPad, please. So this is a map of Africa before the Berlin Conference?
Correct. So what we were prior to the Berlin Conference, we were massive, powerful kingdoms. Kingdoms with well-established religious and educational systems. Kingdoms that preceded the Greek civilization, the Roman Empire. If the truth be told, civilization began in Africa. Have you ever wondered why? When they talk about Greek philosophers, the mathematicians, they were sent to Egypt for training, to Egypt for advancement. It's because Africa already had it. The pyramids, the Zimbabwe ruins, they were there over 2,500 years before the Greek civilization, 2,500 years before the Roman Empire. It all started in Africa. That's part of the history that was cut out, and they set out to get us to forget that life as we know it began in Africa. Civilization as we know it began in Africa. The Europeans stole it from us.
Explain the difference between the AU and the AUC.
The African Union is the membership of all the 55 African heads of states. The African Union Commission is the working organ of the African Union. So the African Union has a president who's always another head of state, and that membership is for 1 year. The working organ of the African Union is the African Union Commission, and it also has a chairperson. That term is 4 years, and that's who Chairman Musa Faki Mahamat is.
Jason.
So, I wanted to ask a question, and if you knew, I have a friend who's from the Comoros Islands, and he was telling me about the difference between some of the other islands, and in particular, one island that's under French control called Mayotte. I was wondering if you could expand on that and tell me a little bit about.
Well, basically, it's like when you go to the Caribbean. You can even go to St. Martin. You have one part which is Dutch and the other part which is French. They just chopped up these islands and these countries arbitrarily. It depends on who wanted what. You take, for example, part of the Kilimanjaro was supposed to all be in Tanzania, but I think it was one of the queens, the English queens was visiting, and the story goes that the granddaughter says, "Oh, but grandma, I like that mountain." And so the grandma just said, "Okay, no problem. Let's just move the border a little bit into Tanzania so my granddaughter can have part of Mount Kilimanjaro." It was so very random, depending on who felt what. You look at how the DRC dips into Zambia in a very funny way. It's because Leopold decided he wanted a little bit more of the copper in Zambia, so he just carved it out the way he wanted it. It was all very arbitrary, and if you had a voice and the ability to do so and say, "This is what I want," okay, no problem, we put the border here.
You mentioned earlier how you don't understand how the UN or any other global humanitarian entity has not interfered and, acted on behalf of AU, AUC, et cetera. I have that same concern now that I'm listening to you. But has there been a process? Is there a process to act against France legally regarding the UN, The Hague? Anything, because this to me seems like a clear violation of humanitarian laws, especially your recollection of them dumping concrete into sewers.
It is a serious violation against humanity. Well, let me say, over the years, we have had some heads of states who have tried to pull out of the pact for the continuation of colonization. Sadly, there were coups in those countries, and they found their heads simply put, on the chopping block. They were assassinated. So the realities and the fear that countries might have are real because of the consequences from France should they decide to pull out. So there really hasn't been. Lately, we heard about the Vice Prime Minister of Italy. They were sick and tired of the young African youth crossing the Mediterranean and ending up on the southern borders. And so they challenged France and said, "Listen, next time we receive these refugees, we are going to bring them to France because you are the one who's taking all those funds out of Africa. That's why African economies cannot develop themselves because of what France is doing in Africa." So, but there hasn't been a coordinated effort to really say, France, enough is enough. You have got to stop this. And I think, as a black woman, as a mother, I'm at a point where I've had enough.
What would that
and something needs to be done.
What would that take for a coordinated effort?
If all of Africa could come together, if the entire continent could come together. But our reality is, because of the stronghold that France has on Africa, France can destabilize any of its former colonies with the push of a button. So the reality is, trying to push back against France is mission impossible at this time, which is why we are very pleased that finally the African heads of states were able to come together and agreed on what we are calling the African Continental Free Trade Area. You got to understand, back in 1963, when our Pan-African leaders came together and created the Organization of African Unity, they were trying to undo the damage done by the Berlin Conference. But unfortunately, when they went to Addis Ababa, they were divided. We had the Casablanca group, who were Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. They were outnumbered by the others, who were the nationalists, who said, let's go slow. The Casablanca group, who said, Africa for the Africans, at home and abroad, African Union now. Had we won, had the Casablanca group won in 1963, Africa would be in a very different place, because all these borders would have been eliminated back then. They came up with a compromise, which we are calling Organization of African Unity. Year in, year out, for 55 years, the African heads of states met. The issue of an Africa speaking with one voice, one continent, one Africa was tabled, and year in and year out, we failed to reach consensus until last year, March 2018, when they finally agreed that enough is enough. Africa must speak with one voice. Africa must enter the world stage as one customs union, as one continent, speaking with one voice. That is the only way that Africa can begin to take her rightful place on the world stage. So it's been a lengthy process, thanks to the legacy of colonization. It seems to me that this should have been a slam dunk. It's common sense. But because of interferences from former colonizers that just kept getting in the way. You look, for example, now West Africa is trying to have the West African echo and have one currency for West Africa. Even that process, it has taken decades because they keep getting interference from outside. So yes, efforts have been made, but not in a coordinated way because of influences and interruptions, interference from the outside.
Ambassador, may I ask another question? And that is about Kwame Nkrumah. Do you think that France and some of these European powers were involved in the death of Kwame Nkrumah?
Not so much France. France was mostly involved in coups that took place in its former colonies. We've had a total of 67 coups on the continent, and 26 countries were involved. And of the 26 countries, 16 countries were former French colonies.
Yeah, I just wanted to just mention very quickly, this is a lot, it's overwhelming.
Yes, it is.
And thank you for your bravery and even speaking out.
Yes.
But one of the things that I was sitting here and I was actually going to the comments, and I guess I don't have a question as so much as a statement. The education that you're giving us, you know, I've never really considered the Berlin Conference. I've never considered.
That's
crux
is
of it
what
all,
set
too.
all this in motion.
Yeah, I mean, I've really never considered that, but to hear you really just give us that timeline and the parallel to what's happening here on the in the United States as far as European influence, and to hear what's going on in Africa and the things that have kept the African citizens, the motherland, have kept them behind, the money, the $500 billion, to France and things like that. It's a lot, but I can listen to you all day. I should say that. But the parallel that I'm really just, if we read these things in history books and we talk a lot in politics about, and a lot of people don't want to hear it because they say, well, that was a long time ago. Well, look at the result of what's happening now.
So what do you want what can African Americans do to help?
I want the African Americans to understand their history, to understand that what goes on in Africa is your problem, you must own it. As a person of African descent, Africa is home, Africa is your anchor, and that you need to realize that until you fill that void, the average African American, if not all African Americans, whether they realize it or not, there is a void from not knowing where you come from. And that void has got to be filled in. It is a void that is very in the subconscious, deep in your subconscious. First, you must realize that void is there. African Americans and descendants of former slaves around the globe, they are the only ones who struggle with the issue of where do I come from. I had a conversation with one of my girlfriends, an African American, about 7 years ago. And I honestly can't believe that in my old age and all these years that I've lived in this country, it had never occurred to me that the issue of where do I come from is an issue. Because I've never had to ask myself that. Until one day I'm having a conversation with her and she just looked me straight in the face and says, you know, those of you from the continent, you never have to deal with the issues that we deal with as African Americans. The simple issue of where do I come from? And for a split second, I stopped and I put myself in her position to say, I wonder what it feels like to not know where you came from. I had this overwhelming sadness and I quickly snapped myself out of it. Now, can you imagine living in that sadness of just not knowing where you come from? Can you imagine? And since then, I have been looking for it when I interact with my African American friends. I remember one time we had an event and this top executive was one of the speakers, but she spoke after me and I talked about this void and the need to reconnect. She started encountering an experience she had while just on a retreat with co-workers. And everybody was talking about where they come from. I'm German American, I'm Irish American. And as they were getting closer to her, it dawned on her that she didn't know where she came from. And she didn't know what she was going to say. And right there on the stage, she broke down. I mean, she could not stop sobbing. I had to go on the stage to hug her because she said, I didn't come here to break down. She never realized that there was this void that was so painful. But because of the environment we were in, she was able to go there. And once she got there, her feelings, she was able to express her feelings. So I want the African Americans to know that Africa is home, that what is going on in Africa is your problems and you must get involved. Until you reconnect with your anchor, which is Africa, you'll always be like a palm tree. When the wind blows this way, here we go. When the wind blows that way, here we go. Africa is home. Accept it. It is who you are. Your DNA is the DNA of an African. Your DNA is the DNA of originality. You are the origin of humanity, and Africa is home. Reconnect. The African heads of states, they agreed on a decision this year which they called R400. R standing for return, 400 standing for the 400 years. They declared once and for all that descendants of former slaves, Africa is their home, and that you must come home. Understand that you are welcome. And don't let anyone make you believe that your suffering was worse than those who stayed on the continent. Do you believe seriously that where they took your forefathers, they left a bed of roses? They left a land of milk and honey? The answer is no. Look at what Leopold did in the Congo. Over 75% of the population was killed. Look at what the British did to the Kikuyu. Look at what the Germans did in Namibia. The carnage continued. And to this day, actually, the carnage in Africa continues. The colonizers have never left Africa. They must get out of Africa. Whatever it takes to get the colonizers to treat Africa fairly, we are simply asking what anybody else on earth would be asking for, to be treated fairly and for them to do the right thing.
What's next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue with the movement. I think we, people of African descent, must understand that Africa is home. But on my priority is to see to it that France abolishes the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. We, the poor African countries, can no longer continue to give billions of dollars to France. That has got to stop. And if it is the last thing that I do before I die, I will stay on it until it's done.
Ambassador Chiambo-Requel, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, it's the holiday season. This is when you think about spending time with family and friends. This is also when you count your blessings and support those less fortunate. This year, be a holiday hero and change someone's life forever. Right now, hundreds of thousands of Americans are sitting in jail without being convicted of a crime. Why? Because they lack the financial resources to pay their bail. Now think about it. If you are arrested for any minor offense, you will be taken directly to jail. If you don't have bail money, you will stay there until a court date is scheduled. That could be days, weeks, or even months. Simply put, America's bail system is broken for people of color. Freedom should be free. That's why the Ebony Foundation has partnered with the Bail Project and is sponsoring the Home by the Holiday campaign. The Bail Project has helped bail out thousands of people over the years, and with your help, they plan to get 1,000 people out of jail by New Year's Day. And that, of course, would be a great holiday gift for many families. A donation from you today can change someone's life tomorrow. Now that you know the people of color represent upwards of 90% of the jail population across the country. Now, without bail, nearly 90% of those charged with misdemeanors pled guilty. Now, however, with paid bail, less than 2% receive the jail sentence. Sometimes justice needs just us. To join the fight, you can donate $25, $50 or more to help the Ebony Foundation bring our brothers and sisters home by the holiday. To donate, go to homebytheholiday.com. That's homebytheholiday.com. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, y'all know what time it is.
Let's go.
Uh-oh.
No charcoal grills are allowed.
I'm white. I got you, bro.
Illegally selling water without a permit
On my property.
Whoa! Hey!
You don't live here.
I'm uncomfortable.
Folks, a group of people carrying a white nationalist flag were caught on camera Saturday attempting to record a video in front of the Emmett Till Memorial in Sumner, Mississippi. Check this out.
We are here at the Emmett Till Monument that represents the civil rights movement for blacks. What we want to know is when are all of the white people. All right.
Well, the bigots didn't realize that, first of all, this sign had been vandalized on a number of occasions. And so what they did was they encased it in a bulletproof covering and installed cameras. Then all of a sudden, the button was hit, and these dumbasses were like, oh, shit. The Negroes have outsmarted us. They've got us. They got our license plates.
Yeah.
They got our likenesses.
Yep.
Oh
And it's like, where are the white people? Oh, you feel free to go. They have memorials. If you want to go to Viola Liuzzo's memorial out between Selma and Montgomery, white woman from Michigan shot and killed, head blown off by 3 Klansmen in a truck. There's a memorial for her. We actually go to the Civil Rights Museum in Lorraine Motel. Yeah, across the street where James L. Ray supposedly did it. Yeah, there's a memorial listing the white people who were killed in the movement. If y'all actually give a damn about the white folks who would kill the movement.
They don't care about that. How sick is it, though, that these many decades later, you have these evil people who continue to want to destroy, harass, sully the memory of a black child that was tortured and murdered.
Why don't they go to the house of the white woman still alive?
Right.
You know,
Who lied?
there you go.
Carolyn Bryant, who's
There
still
you go.
living, who admits she lied.
Who has paid no consequence for her lie. These people, beyond evil, they crazy.
Yep.
And history belongs to she who holds the pen. The problem is that these people don't know history. We don't teach history. They don't know the meaning of Emmett Till. All they know is they got their little sheets upside their heads.
First of
They're
all,
walking around.
we assume they can read.
Oh, yeah, okay, Roland, that's what's right. I agree with you, Roland. That's what's right.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. It is hilarious just again watching these folks. But these are the people though. Melik, your boy wants voting for him.
Who? You say that again?
These are the folks your boy wants voting for him.
Well, I don't think he's so gung-ho on people like Richard Spencer and others voting for him. He does not mind if he gets their vote, but I don't think that that's something.
Say it again? Who was Stephen Miller's mentor?
Oh, it's Richard Spencer.
Well, you can draw the connection to to Stephen Miller, but
I'm sorry. Wait.
You can draw advisor, but I don't put Richard Spencer and Milo in the same
One
bag
second.
as Stephen Miller. I just don't.
Why
You
not?
don't?
No,
You don't?
How?
I don't.
How?
Because
When they put themselves in the same bag.
well, because
Maybe
Hold
a little
on.
different.
Wait. I want to slow this down. I want you to enunciate it clearly.
So,
what?
Richard Spencer.
That Richard Spencer.
Yeah, that Richard Spencer, whiny guy that was whining. Richard Spencer. By the way, that was hilarious. I thought
He sounded like he was going through puberty.
I couldn't.
He really did. Like the cracking of the
was
voice.
the mentor for Stephen. You told me that.
For Stephen Miller.
Yeah,
Hold on. Wait.
White House.
For the audience, explain who Stephen Miller is.
Stephen Miller works in the White House. He's the person who's actually crafting the immigration policy for President Trump.
Hold up. Not just immigration.
Oh yeah, not just immigration.
So if you're going to ask me why I don't put them in the same box, I've never liked anything about Richard Spencer. I've never liked anything about Milo. You can disagree with some policies that Stephen Miller is advocating while he's in the White House, but from my perspective, Stephen Miller is not that racist, is not that white supremacist.
So he doesn't.
Have you taken a look at
Because
what's
you
going
don't
on
have
the border?
Stephen Miller
Yeah,
on
I
tape
have.
doing this.
But what's the racist policy that you're talking about on the border?
Boy, we don't have time for
But
that.
that's what I'm saying. So if you're going to ask me why I don't put them in the same bag, I'm saying you can
do we
disagree
really
with
need to go
you
through
can
the whole
disagree
border
with
thing?
but you can disagree with policies that are going on at the border without calling someone
Separating families
without
and all that.
but how is that racist though?
All right.
That's what I'm saying. So now you're saying that separating families, that's a racist thing. That's not what I heard from this fool, Richard Spencer.
Are they separating white immigrant families?
Well, where are they coming? Are they crossing the border?
Are they separating white immigrant families?
But I'm just saying, are they crossing? Crossing the border?
There are white.
No, they're coming through planes, going over the border.
But they're coming.
But they're overstaying visas. They're supposed to go through the very same process. So why are the 100,000 Canadians who overstay visas and stay in the United States?
But we're not separating people. But they're not separating people at the border who overstay visas, though. They're not separating. But they're not at the border separating people who overstayed visas. So that's a little intellectually dishonest to make that argument.
Policy.
But it's a policy that would have been implemented by probably any Republican.
No, that's not true.
Well, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
why wouldn't it?
No,
why wouldn't it? The only thing that
wasn't done by
the only
Bush.
thing that you said about
it wasn't done.
But we don't have the prices.
Allowed more immigration.
But we don't have the prices that we're having now. But I don't believe that this is something that's so out of step with the mainstream Republican Party.
1.6 million. That was the record was set under Bush.
Right.
He still didn't do the things that Trump is doing.
But because Trump did it, does it make it racist? That's not racist. You can disagree with it, but separating families is not a racist policy. It's a policy you don't agree with, but it's not racist. It's a convenient argument that the left likes to push.
When you have Stephen Miller's own family, his own family call him out for his bigoted policies. His own family. I'm not kin to him.
I have people in my family who disagree with things that I say, and disagree with even me being a Republican. So that doesn't matter.
Right, especially when you have family members who probably say, "What the hell are you thinking for voting Donald Trump and all the stuff?"
Well, they do. I have friends who say it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And guess what? They're right.
No, they're not right. You just have they're wrong, just like you're wrong. You just have an opinion.
I'm not wrong.
You can't tell me what I'm right and wrong for doing.
You listen to that woman talk about Africa. And after Donald Trump called Africa shithole countries, you were like, oh, with a good education,
okay, but this is not what we're going to do. You heard what this is not what we're going to do on the set. This is not what we're going to do on the set. You heard my response to what she said.
We can do whatever I want to do.
My response to what she said.
I didn't say you called.
You don't have to invoke Donald Trump in the argument. You heard what I said. You heard what I said on the set to this African woman who was talking here. So you don't have to do that. I understand it gets the hits and all that type of stuff, but you don't have to go there. You don't have to go there talking about how I'm talking about how I'm listening to this African woman and voting for Donald Trump. I have a mind of my own. I can listen to people all day long and disagree with things that they do.
But you didn't disagree with her.
Well, I didn't disagree with her.
You agreed with her.
But what she said was nothing about Donald Trump. She was talking about what's happening with France and Africa. I understand. This
Okay,
is the
so France can do that.
This is the anti-Trump resistance. I understand that, but you don't have to. You don't have to tie me listening to her and then talk about why am I supporting Donald Trump when over 90% of black people vote Democrat anyway. So you don't have to. You don't have to do that.
But you don't see the parallels?
What do you mean? What parallel? Well, let's talk about policy. What is Trump stealing from black people?
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're saying the parallel, what's the actual parallel to what this sister was talking about as far as what's going on in Africa and what's going on in the United States of America?
When he said Nigerians won't go back to their huts.
Wait, easy. Well, hold on.
He's talking about the dehumanization of African people.
She discussed a policy. She discussed policy. You're talking words.
No.
So let's go with the policy.
No, actually. He's not talking.
Well, yes, he is.
Excuse me.
No, I'm not.
Excuse me.
Well, that's what he just said.
No, excuse me.
But
I am going to state facts and,
I just heard
and
what he just
receipts.
said.
Donald Trump has changed policy led by Stephen Miller when it comes to dealing with Liberians. They've changed policy when it comes to limiting what they call refugees down to a low of 18,000 a year. The people, excuse me, I'm not done. The individuals who helped us in Sudan fight terrorism, they basically said, y'all can't come here. He has changed immigration policy that has had a negative impact on African nations, on Haiti, nations of people of color. He has said, why can't we get more folks from Denmark? And so what you have is a colonizer in the White House. So I can link. You
can't.
Actually, I can.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. You can't.
I can link Donald Trump to what that sister was talking about in those, and when she's talking about what has happened historically with African nations as well. When you have an individual who has no regard for African nations, who call them shithole countries, that's what he said. And his policies,
they won't go back to their huts.
His policies reflect that. Those are receipts, Melik.
Well, that's. I mean, as we already discussed, it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says or does. You're not.
No.
Agree with
Deal with the receipts. Well, did he do what I said about Liberia?
I don't know the answer to that, Roland. I don't know the answer to that.
Guess what?
You know the answer.
Guess what?
I don't know the answer
Kristen
to that.
Clark with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law was on this show and talked about the fight. I'm not done.
Well, I'm not on there,
talked
so I
about
don't know.
the fight that they had with the Trump administration when it came to Liberians.
Well, I don't know anything about that.
Well, guess what? You know what? Well, damn it, use Google.
Well, you want me to Google it on the show?
Hey, hold up.
Well, you
go right ahead.
You know about them lowering the number of refugees that are allowed in the country. You know that.
I do know about that. But I do know about that.
And you know about the things he said about the Somalian sister who's in Congress.
I can disagree with that or I can agree with it. But it doesn't mean that just because you guys have an opinion on something that I have to agree with what it is that you're saying. He lowered the number of refugees. You say, okay, well, that makes him a racist. That somehow, I guess, the fact of what we were talking about.
Bottom line is here, folks. Bottom line is here.
It doesn't matter what he says it does. We just talked about
Richard Spencer. We talked about Richard Spencer.
And you heard what Richard Spencer said.
And we said point blank.
You heard
Richard
what
Spencer said. Richard Spencer made it perfectly clear.
Said, hail Trump.
Who looked up to him when he was at Duke. If you are Stephen Miller and you look up to a racist white supremacist in college, in fact, if you go back to look at the writings of Stephen Miller in college, Stephen Miller then is the Stephen Miller now. And this is the man who is a senior advisor to Donald Trump in the Oval Office. It is clear. It is undeniable. It is factual. There are receipts. We can finger pop. You can do whatever you want to. But the bottom line is a bigoted, racist Stephen Miller is advising the person who is sitting in the Oval Office. And don't forget, you've had individuals in the Trump administration who've had to resign because of their ties to other white supremacists. Something must be consistent if he seems to manage to attract these type
dislike
of
Donald
people.
Trump.
No, these are just factual.
That's what.
All right, folks, you want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Please go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. This is where, of course, we will call out the bigots, regardless of who they are, and we'll show them exactly who they are.
No, you don't, Roland.
Such as the dude. Oh, yes, we do.
No, you don't.
Yes, we do. I mean, I'll be more than happy.
You will
I'll
call out anything
He
that
was
paints
so close to
replace
wrapping up
Trump
this
or
shit.
Republican Party. It doesn't matter. You will call out anything.
It's amazing.
You will call out
It's amazing.
that paints
It's amazing.
Donald Trump or the Republican Party
It's
in the
amazing
limelight.
when
It
you
doesn't
make
matter what.
excuses.
It is not even an excuse, Roland. That's just the
when you
reality
make
of how it is.
excuses
That's a
for
debate tactic.
a
I get
bigoted
it.
individual.
I
All right,
get it.
y'all.
I get it.
RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, Cash App, PayPal, Square. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. Please support what we do. Tomorrow, I'll be traveling to Cabo. We broadcasting from Cabo on Thursday and Friday. Tomorrow, we got election results right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And I wonder if the Mississippi candidate, remember the one who pictured in front of this massive Confederate flag? Remember that one? Wonder if he won. Oh, matter of fact, it wasn't one Confederate flag. There's about 30 of them. But hey, it's a Mississippi thing.
Probably Texas.
No, it's not. That's your state.
The great
That's
state,
your state.
The great state of Mississippi.
That's your state. Where the rebel flag
The
is
great
still,
state of Mississippi.
where the rebel flag
Great
is still,
state of Mississippi.
and I dare say,
It is.
I dare say the I dare
Mississippi.
say the
Yes, I
ambassador.
do.
The ambassador talked about the Berlin Conference. Don't forget, it was in 1891 when Mississippi held a state convention where they ensured that African American will never ever be elected statewide.
That's
in
not true.
Mississippi.
Let's deal with facts.
Actually was.
Well, and how many
Actually
African
was.
Americans have not
I
won
said
an election?
statewide. And
But how
guess
many
what?
how
And
many
prior
African
to that,
Americans
prior
have been
to that,
affected by
there
it?
were African Americans.
How many African
prior to
Americans
that,
have been affected
prior
by
to
that law in
that, prior
Mississippi,
to that,
Roland?
African
You talk about
Americans were elected
receipts.
statewide.
Let's talk about receipts.
Ever since then,
How many African
ever since
Americans have been
then,
affected by
not
that?
one was elected.
How many African
Y'all,
Americans have
those
been
are
affected
facts.
by it?
Easy.
You read it just
None.
like I did.
None.
It just doesn't fit your argument.
No.
You tried this on the show the last
Nobody
time.
black can be elected statewide because it's your state.
What?
We've actually had blacks elected statewide in Texas.
What?
Have there been any elected black? Have there any?
And it has
Let me ask you a
nothing-
question.
and it has
Let me ask you a
nothing to
question.
do with the law.
Have there been any blacks elected statewide in Mississippi since 1890?
I do not believe so.
Let me ask you a question.
According
Jason, you teach African history. Have there been any black people elected statewide? First of all, you don't even have the answer.
This is the game. Well, I do know.
No, I asked you yes or no.
Because
no, yes
we
or no.
talked to- no, it has not.
So
it has nothing to do with the law.
There's not a single African
And it has
American.
nothing to do with
what
the
it has to
Jim
do with
Crow law that you're referencing. And in fact, you've read it.
What
just
it has
like
to do
I
with?
have. That has been tested once in
No,
the
what-
history.
what it has to
since
do
the
with?
1890 law, and only one person has been affected by that. That was Ronnie Musgrove,
and let me say,
who
y'all.
eventually
So why
ended up
not-
becoming
But see,
governor
Jason.
of the state.
Get rid of
Now
it.
here's why.
You can get
here's
rid
why.
of it,
Here's
but
why.
don't try to act as if
here's
this
why.
is the
Because
reason
the
why
law.
black people
Because the
aren't
law.
winning statewide.
The law
That is-
that I'm
if you're
speaking
gonna
of.
talk about
The
truth,
law I'm
talk about
speaking
truth,
of. The law I'm
because what
speaking
you're
of
saying
is a way
is
to
simply
protect.
a lie, Roland.
See, here's a piece. Nobody black can get through the current system in Mississippi. Mississippi created a
That's
back.
not even true.
Mississippi created a
That's not even
backstop.
true.
Mississippi created a
you should just
backstop.
focus on Texas.
Mississippi
here.
created a backstop.
Because you don't
if
even know
somebody
Mississippi
black
history.
got through the one way, they got a second way to stop
How
them
many
from
times
getting
has
through.
that law been tested, Roland?
Because
How many times has it been tested,
nobody black
Roland?
got through.
How many times has
I'm
it
gonna
been
see out
tested?
about Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Once.
That's Mississippi, y'all.
Once.
That's Melik State.
Yeah, absolutely. You
With
can
the Confederate
badmouth-
flag
You can
still-
mock Mississippi
with the
all
rebel
day
flag
long.
still in
I
their
rep
flag.
hard for Mississippi. That's
All right, speaking of a racist, Richard Spencer, who tried to put a respectable face on the alt-right, frankly, white supremacy, has been caught on tape using racist slurs against African Americans and Jewish people. Oh, no shock. The audio was released on YouTube by one of his rivals, former Breitbart writer Milo Yiannopoulos, who's actually gone broke. Why? Because, well, he's a bigot as well. Mm-hmm. Boy, ain't nothing like white racists on white racist crime.
Yeah. Look at God. Look at God.
Here's the audio.
We're coming back here like a fucking 100 times. I am so mad. I am so fucking mad at these people. They don't do this to fucking me. We're gonna fucking ritualistically humiliate them. I am coming back here every fucking weekend if I have to. Like, this is never over. I win. They fucking lose. That's how the world fucking works. Little fucking kikes. They get ruled by people like me. Little fucking octoroons. My ancestors fucking enslaved those pieces of fucking shit. We're gonna win. I rule the fucking world. Those pieces of shit get ruled by people like me. They look up and see a face like mine looking down at them. That's how the fucking world works. We are gonna destroy this fucking town.
Yeah. So
see, when I had when I had Richard Spencer on TV One, and it was very interesting when I had him on, because one, here's why I did it. Now, one, we knew he was an absolutely racist white supremacist, but see, I wanted people to understand the game, okay? Because see what happened. All these media people were writing about how he dresses, the whole preppy look. He went to a private school in Dallas, went to Duke. What did he say? Who was his mentor? His white racist mentor at Duke? Stephen Miller.
Well, Stephen Miller, he was Stephen Miller's
Right.
mentor.
So all the races hung together. So all the little races hung together. And it was very interesting too, because see, so when he asked me who I was, and I love all these stupid people who don't know how to debate. He thought I was going to say black man. And I told him, I said, I'm a man. He was like, see, my deal is, I love throwing people off when you debated him. And I was sitting here and I was just letting him just dig his hole deeper and deeper, because I wanted to show people, one, how clueless and ignorant these folks are, and how they try to play this little cute game of no, we've got no problem with y'all. We just want our own piece of the world. No, these are the people who have no problem with Trump in office. The people right here. Because Trump pushes their little buttons of demographic changes, the whole white fear, stuff along those lines. And when this audio gets leaked, like, Richard, we knew that's who you were. We knew you were racist.
That was like water is wet.
We knew that.
You know.
And Milo as well.
Yeah. And
all the racist games that he's played.
Yeah, and that's my thing about, I'm not surprised that Richard Spencer was caught on camera or video, audio, anywhere saying that. And for all of that mouth that he had, talking about what he would do, he didn't do that when he came here when the inauguration, when somebody knocked him in his mouth here during Trump's inauguration. In fact, he had the police come, they crowded around him. So for all of that bravado that he had about what he was going to do, he didn't bring it to the people when he came here.
He damn sure didn't raise his voice with me.
Well, he's not going to do that. But Milo, dude, seriously, you of all people, because they're two peas in the same pot. We don't even have to overanalyze that.
Him and what's this guy's name?
Milo
Spencer?
or Richard?
Spencer. Milo and Spencer actually hate each other.
Yeah, no.
But they're two sides of the same
hate
coin.
each other because they're competing for the same audience.
Right.
Oh, well.
And they're competing for the same money.
They do the same thing.
And both of them are trying to present this other view. See, this is the thing that people need to understand about white mainstream media. They fall for the okie doke because, see, a Spencer and a Milo, they don't wear Klan hood.
Nope.
See, so it's it's how they dress. It's the tweed jackets with little patches and everything.
And that's what made it fascinating to everybody.
Precisely. Yeah. Whereas we always understood the White Citizens Council in Mississippi, in Georgia, in Dallas, and other places, they were made up of the respectable people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They were made up of the
judges,
judges,
the
sheriffs, the mayor. Anybody else saw the Taraji Henson movie Best of Enemies, which was a great movie. She did not play some lackey who was just sitting here making white folks feel comfortable. She played this hardcore black activist in Durham, North Carolina. And in that movie, her nemesis was the head of the Klan there. Well, guess who was in bed with him? Bankers, the mayor, the city council, and that's the reality. But see, Spencer comes along with this whole new message, this new sheen, and media starts talking about how his whole preppy look. No, racists will be racist. This is what they say and do. And so you got Milo, Mac, lost his book deal, got kicked off YouTube.
Lost like $2 million.
All that complaining about.
No, he's $2 million in debt.
Right, and complaining about how I'm broke, and I'm like, I really don't care if a bigot is broke. Sorry, that's what you are. And so it is hilarious just again watching these folks. But these are the people though. Melik, your boy wants voting for them. All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, it's the holiday season. This is when you think about spending time with family and friends. This is also when you count your blessings and support those less fortunate. This year, be a holiday hero and change someone's life forever. Right now, hundreds of thousands of Americans are sitting in jail without being convicted of a crime. Why? Because they lack the financial resources to pay their bail. Now think about it. If you are arrested for any minor offense, you will be taken directly to jail. If you don't have bail money, you will stay there until a court date is scheduled. That could be days, weeks, or even months. Simply put, America's bail system is broken for people of color. Freedom should be free. That's why the Ebony Foundation has partnered with the Bail Project and is sponsoring the Home by the Holiday campaign. The Bail Project has helped bail out thousands of people over the years, and with your help, they plan to get 1,000 people out of jail by New Year's Day. Now, that, of course, would be a great holiday gift for many families. A donation from you today can change someone's life tomorrow. Now that you know the people of color represent upwards of 90% of the jail population across the country. Now, without bail, nearly 90% of those charged with misdemeanors pled guilty. Now, however, with paid bail, less than 2% receive the jail sentence. Sometimes justice needs just us. To join the fight, you can donate $25, $50 or more to help the Ebony Foundation bring our brothers and sisters home by the holiday. To donate, go to homebytheholiday.com. That's homebytheholiday.com. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered. Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it just messes me up every single time. So, I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wilds, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.